Good afternoon to everybody who's attending. Thank you all for joining us today. We're here to have our little webinar talking about what you think about going back to the office and working from home, the balance between the two. So I'm joined today by three panelists who I'd like to introduce to you. First of all, Murray, perhaps you could just say a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So, Murray Preston, I work at BlackRock, based in Edinburgh. I work in a team called Global Provider Strategy, so it's global providers you can substitute for global custodians with all the key services that they provide, such as custody, accounting, T, etc. And the S stands for the strategy and really who's going to be where in 5, 10, 15 years' time. I have responsibility for this region, for EMEA, and also for APAC. I was reminding myself yesterday that I've been in the industry for over 35 years now, having started my career at a company called WM, and if anybody can remember them, then they're older than me, which was Bankers Trust, and then Deutsche Bank, and then State Street when I left, and I had a great stint for 3 years at Martin Currie before joining BlackRock, coming up for 15 years ago now.
Good, thanks very much, Murray. I hate to say it, I do remember WM very well. I'm sufficiently old to do that. Let me turn now to Peter Christmas, NatWest Trustees. Peter.
Thanks, Richard. Yes, Peter Christmas. I'm the Director of Client Management at NatWest Trustee and Depository Services, which is the largest UK depository for authorised funds. I've been there around 5 years and probably worked for most, if not all, of the major global custodians at one point in the last, not quite 35 years, I think 33 years. I've, broadly speaking, been involved in the custody industry in the UK, in Asia, and in the US as well. And I'm currently based in a small office somewhere between West Byfleet and Woking.
I think that's not an uncommon story these days, Peter. Thanks very much. Can I turn now to Tim? Tim from Cooper Wood and Associates.
Thank you, Richard, and good afternoon. Yes, Tim Wood, Cooper Wood and Associates. We're a asset servicing consultancy firm formed last year, and we work with asset managers, asset owners, and asset services in helping people either save money or increase their revenues through sales and RM, operational efficiencies, or supply management. And I'm the middle child of the three because I've done 34 years, so I'm right slap in the middle. So not the youngest and not the oldest.
Thanks very much, Tim. Yes, I'm not going to mention how many years I've been in the business because I think I'd outstrip all of you, but there we go. But for the last, God knows, 25 years or so, I've been running R&M consultants, having previously worked at a number of different custodians. So those of you who know R&M consultants, we're in the market research space within the asset servicing industry. Anyway, that's enough of that for the moment. What I would like to do is just pull up a very quick little presentation I want to share with you. If I can click the right buttons, it would be quite good. And hopefully now you can see the screen that I'm sharing. So first of all, it's important just to say a big thank you to our sponsors for today, to Pictet and to RBC. Without whom we wouldn't be able to run this event, so thanks to them. So what I want to do is just to run through a survey we ran a little earlier this year, which was just asking 3 very simple questions just to get people's feedback on their position on working from home. And it did also identify a number of issues, which I think is part of the reason why we're here today, so we can talk about them a bit more. It's obviously an ever-changing scene, so I think it's quite interesting to just to debate this publicly. So the 3 questions were very simply, where are you currently working? In a year's time, where do you expect to be working? And in a year's time, where would you like to be working? So as you can see, most people, when this question was asked, that 69% were working from the home all the time, 24% partly from home and partly in the office, and 7% in the office all the time. This wasn't just a UK survey, we got responses from around the world. So the expectation of where people think they're going to be working is perhaps not dissimilar, in the sense that 67% are looking to do a balance between partly working from home and partly in the office. 22% are expecting to be full-time in the office. That's not a lot different to where people would actually like to be working. So clearly the desire is there, and this is just one survey that's done within this industry. There's been plenty of other research done covering other industries. It's just one there that really proves, I think, that people are looking to get that balance where they can. So, oh, I missed one. The slide, hang on a minute. So today's agenda, we just want to review the survey which we've done. Just talk about the issues that might be arising from going back to the office, get the view from our panelists, but also we'd really like to get the views from attendees. So if you've got any questions or any contributions you'd like to make, let us know via the Q&A link. And Fiona, who is there present behind the scenes, is going to monitor this. And what we'll do is we'll give you video and audio access, effectively making you a member of one of the panel whilst you ask the question. The last time we ran one of these webinars, people were a little concerned. They didn't really fully understand exactly how we're running it, because I think a lot of people are much more used to running Zoom meetings than they are Zoom webinars. But of course, in a webinar, the attendees can't be seen or heard. Hence the reason why we want to elevate people up to the point of being a panelist, so we can see people and hear them if they've got a point they wish to make. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is to move to perhaps go to Murray first, just to ask the question. Do you think working from home is here today? Can you give us some sort of personal background and perhaps give us an indication what BlackRock's up to on this particular topic as we look to the future of 2021?
Sure, Richard. It's been 12 months for us in our part of the world, a bit longer for colleagues in large parts of APAC. It's been an extraordinary experience. It's one of those very few things, and we were kind of half joking earlier, talking about how long we've all been in the industry, or those that are on the panel anyway. It's one of those rare things that we can actually say nobody has ever undergone this before. So it was absolutely new to everyone, new to asset managers, asset services, consultants, new to everyone. What it did prove immediately is that all the contingency plannings that we've been forensically reviewing with our main providers over multiple years actually worked, and worked extremely well. Some of the challenges we had early on was connectivity within BlackRock, meaning Zoom, WebEx. We have a system called Jabber. But we got those technical issues ironed out quite quickly. The challenges for the banks and therefore for ourselves and for our clients was there was a lot of manual instructions. Wet signatures were required. Everybody was used to it for so long. But again, we kind of quickly worked through those challenges ourselves within BlackRock, and then worked through those challenges with our partners. And it's not just about our providers. Clearly, as we all know, we all work with multiple constituents, not just providers in the asset services, the asset management space. So those were the initial challenges. There was great connectivity in the firm from the top down, regular communications, checking in, making sure that everybody's the technology was working appropriately for everyone. But as a month led to 2 months, led to 3 months, we began to realise that we were here for the long haul. And in the UK, clearly we had this period within early summer through the summer where you know, slightly different in Scotland than it was from England. We were a bit more cautious in Scotland, but you know, there was a lot of relaxation of the rules. And then, of course, as we saw throughout towards the end of the year, that kind of caught up on everybody with the extraordinary number of people that caught COVID and were hospitalised, and sadly, many who died as well. So we really realised we were there for the long haul. And you know, it's a topic we'll probably come back to, I'm sure, in the next 45 minutes or so, and that is the well-being of individuals. And that's been a huge topic in our firm, and there's been, you know, lots of tools made available to staff members to help them through this process. And I'm conscious of time here, Richard, but I'll also mention the other thing. I mean, you know, my children are all at university, or actually 2 are working now as well, which is great. but many people had additional challenges of young children, preschool, and then the schools closing, etc., etc. So it's been a phenomenal time for everyone. We've been very cognizant of that within the firm with our colleagues, but also with our partners at the providers as well. There have been a few funny incidents. I don't want to share any of those, but there have been some funny incidents with children who would not take no for an answer, or dogs that just wanted to leap up on their owner during calls, which is quite amusing. But again, I go back to what I said at the very beginning. What was unique about this is we were all experiencing this at the same time. So there was quite a bit of latitude there. I could go on, but I'm happy to stop there, Richard.
Yeah, thanks very much, Murray. Yeah, I do, as a parent, albeit of adult children now, I do feel desperately sorry for all those who've had to go all through this homeschooling for months and months at a time. Yeah. Would have been really challenging, I think. I'm not sure I could have managed it. Sorry, I should have said to everybody attending too that, you know, if in a normal conference, you could have a look around the room and see who's here. Unfortunately, you can't do that here. But just to give you some flavour of the people we got, it's a bit of a mixture. It's about half the people we were expecting to attend are coming from fund managers, and the balance coming from a mixture of custodians, independent consultants, and various other people. So about 50 people in total is what we're expecting. Let me turn now to Peter, if I may, and ask you the same question, really. Is working from home here to stay, and what's been your experience at NatWest Trustees?
So I guess the first thing I'd say is I first worked from home, I think in 2001, when I had a laptop with a plug-in phone card, effectively, which connected to the internet. It was pretty slow and clunky, but you know, it is working from home here to stay. You know, from my view, it's been here for a long time. Now, having said that, what I would say is that both in terms of what's happened over the last year, but also in terms of what will happen, is it won't be the same for everybody. So it depends on your personal circumstances. It depends on the team that you're involved in and the work that you're doing, what your working patterns will be going forward. So just, you know, briefly in terms of our experience in the last year, I mean, as I mentioned at the beginning, I came to my office on March the 17th last year, and I've been here every day, apart from one day when I went into London to clear my desk, which was in June. It was like going to a ghost town round about the Bank of England. And that's the only time. And I would say, much as I've missed a lot of things, I wouldn't say it's hugely affected my productivity or the ability to do my job, particularly as the time has gone on and people have got more and more used to doing things like Zoom calls, etc. What are some of the really interesting things, I think, and I'll try and emphasize the positive ones, particularly, is just the level of interaction between teams. So we would typically, before this, we would do an all-staff meeting. We'd try and do it physically, although across 2 locations, London and Edinburgh, you know, once a quarter or something like that. We started pretty much immediately doing weekly all-staff calls to just get people together in one place for 30 minutes to give an update. and we didn't continue that through the whole year because it wasn't necessary, but that was really good. I was doing calls with my team every day. So we'd do an 8:30 or 9 o'clock call every morning, which I wouldn't have been doing in the office. And actually, it was great because you almost got to know people better in that period of time. And I'd actually recently taken on a team in Edinburgh, so it was really good to actually get to know people, to talk to them all the time. So I think there's been some difficult things to do with initially getting technology sorted out. We had 90 people in Edinburgh who'd never worked at home. Our core operations team had not had home working as one of their options. Between sort of mid-March and the end of March, we shifted 100% of them to home working. That was a challenge. The technology was a challenge. Getting everybody's home environment was a challenge, but we got over it and it worked. I think back to the point, and I think Murray mentioned it a little bit about well-being. Forget putting aside the pandemic itself and that effect on people, but actually home working has a massively different effect on different people, depending on who they live with, what their setup is, whether they've got homeschooling, etc. And I think as a leader in this kind of situation, you have to be flexible. You have to be very understanding to people's individual situations. Obviously you need to get the work done, but if people are at home, actually they do tend to offer a lot more flexibility as well. So I think that's been a really important thing that's come out.
Good, thanks very much, Peter. Much appreciated. I'm going to turn now to Tim. Now, Tim, like myself, you don't work for a large organisation anymore, but I'm sure you've got contacts, been talking to a lot of people. Just give us your feedback.
Sure, thank you, Richard. Most people would agree that the industry's coped pretty remarkably well over the last 12 months or so, both employers and employees. And as Peter and Murray said, people have adapted extremely well. But what I would say is, from the people we're talking to and what you can read in the press, there is a significant shift going on right now whereby the novelty is wearing off pretty much for a lot of people. And, not everybody's got a nice home office and, not got a few kids and a few dogs running around the place and that kind of stuff. So the pressure for employers to get people back to work, and the pressure people feel that they may want to go back to work, and not everybody, fits into kind of a hybrid working model, 2 days at home, 3 days in the office, or vice versa. And there's something in the press last week saying that 79% of people want to work in a hybrid model, which means people do want to go back to the office. They do want to interact with their peers on a face-to-face basis. And let's not forget, one of the most valuable ways of learning and improving and developing is just the day-to-day interaction, watching other people, how they work, how they act, and how they influence. And all of those things aren't always possible in the same way as they are inside an office when you're doing it on a Zoom or a Teams call. The other thing I think is interesting is that lots of people came out 6 months or a year ago and said they're going to reduce real estate dramatically. We're going to have 100% working from home forever, et cetera, et cetera. And some of the big names that, we all work with, it's interesting that there's a statistic that three quarters of people 6 months ago said they were reducing their real estate allocation. Today, that's less than 20% are still planning on doing that, because this wave of kind of, the tedium of being at home and missing just the social interaction of being able to bounce off colleagues and talk to people face to face, and all of those things around how do you manage difficult staff situations across a video call? How do you manage difficult client conversations without having some of the face-to-face opportunities? It's not impossible, but it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I know both my kids live in London. They both have been working from home for the last year. Both their partners are teachers, so for a large chunk of that year, their partners have been teaching from home as well, and they both live in one-bedroom flats. It's been a hell of a struggle for them, and I'm sure that's been, there are many other cases just like that. But I think it does bring us on to a good point of how you, I mean, running everything via Zoom or video, a bit like Peter said earlier on, working from home has been around a long time, video conferencing's been around a long time, but it's never been a substitute for actual physical meeting up with people. Murray, I mean, you touched earlier on some of the things that BlackRock have been doing in terms of trying to support staff and putting things in place. But for you, how's it been in terms of motivating staff and keeping on top of it? And have you had to go through recruitment at all? I can't imagine what it's like trying to interview somebody via a Zoom call and then hiring them.
Yes, to the latter, we have. It's been unusual. We had an undergraduate in Edinburgh, located in London, who completed this. We curtailed, I think a lot of firms did this, curtailed our whole undergraduate program last year, which was a real shame. Our summer interns, as they're called in the US. You know, so that was difficult. We've hired a couple of people in Gregorm, and we're in the process of hiring somebody in Singapore. It is very hard. It's very different. You know, generally speaking, what I do is a people business. I'm a relationship manager, and you know, to Tim's point there just now, it's difficult to have some tough negotiations over Zoom, WebEx, or whatever. But we've all had to adapt, and that's the point. It's all about adapting. Personally, it's been okay. I'd like to do another year of this without volunteering for it. It has been quite tricky. To Peter's point earlier on, we did the same. We increased the number of meetings certainly initially, and then maybe pulled it in a little bit to give you a sense. You know, we're a small team in Edinburgh. The whole team of global provider strategies is 32, 33 globally now. And we were about 7 in Edinburgh, just to give you a sense of that. But you know, we would have we would maintain our Monday morning start of the week meeting. On a mid of the week, we included the Singapore team and the Gurgaon team as well, along with the Edinburgh team. And then on a Friday afternoon, we did what a lot of people did. We started off doing a quiz for a bit of fun late on a Friday afternoon or late-ish. We just renamed it the Friday afternoon giggle because everybody was getting sick of the quizzes. So, but we have a total kind of 30 minutes or 1 hour social session. So that's kind of keeping it local. From a team perspective, you know, we maintained the monthly meeting as you know, a weekly management team meeting, and we'd have odd ad hoc meetings. But you know, but more broadly, to your other question, you know, BlackRock has been phenomenal, and I'm not just saying that. They have been phenomenal, as I said earlier on, from the top down. So all types of tools have been made available to any and all individuals with respect to you know, online tutorials to help them through the process. Actual physical people, both within the firm and out with the firm, if they wanted to talk to somebody independently. Clearly, management at all levels have been encouraged to maintain one-to-one meetings and ensure that those did take place. Last year, I'm trying to remember, I lose track. I do genuinely lose track of time, Richard. But we did, you know, from the top down. I think it was around about April, I think it was April. You know, there was a dictate from the top down saying, you know, everybody's got to take at least 2 days off a month. Now that doesn't sound very much, but it was important, over and above anybody's, you know, people's normal holiday, even if they couldn't travel a week or 2 weeks. So this was, you know, you must do this. Another big thing for us was Friday afternoons. No external meeting, no internal external meetings on a Friday afternoon, unless it was a client-facing meeting or unless it was a meeting that really had to take place. And that gives you the opportunity to try and catch up on the rest of the week, and not go from literally one video meeting to the next, both internal and external. So that did make a bit of a difference. That's been emphasised again for this year, as we expect to be doing this through till at least the end of June, and we'll see what happens after that. Again, I could go on, but conscious of time, so stop there.
Yeah, thanks very much, Murray. We do have one question that's just been put in by someone who's asked if we can ask it on their behalf. Who funds working from home tools like laptops, internet dongles, internet data, etc., where the costs may be a concern for some organisations? We've been taking the approach of only critical staff only, but it's obvious that more and more of all staff and functions need also to be working from home, so all business is seen as continuing normally. Yeah, that's quite a good question. Peter, can I come to you for that one?
Yeah, I think, I mean, our approach has been to provide people what they need. So if people don't have technology at home, then we would provide them with a Chromebook, I think is the technology that we would use. If people don't have a proper desk or a chair, we would provide them with a desk or a chair. People have the opportunity to take their screens from the office. So, I think, everyone has to work at home. We realized fairly quickly that this wasn't going to be we weren't at home for a couple of weeks. Therefore, you need to make sure that people have got the best possible working environment. What we also did relatively early on in our Edinburgh office is to make space available for people who needed it. So, there were some people who were finding it extremely hard to cope with working at home because of their other situations and needed somewhere else to go. And obviously, within government guidelines, but there were periods of time where people could go into the office in Gogarburn and just have a way that they could get access to some kind of space and get the things done that they needed to get done. So I think that was quite important. But what I was going to say at the beginning, in sort of reference to the question you asked, Murray, is that actually one of the most important things about this has been know your people, ask the questions, talk to people, find out what their situations are. Obviously, you can't pry, but it's that sort of basic management thing, which is probably easy to overlook when you're all in the office because maybe it's more obvious. You have to ask people, you have to make time to check in with people and find out what concerns they've got or what issues they've got, because unless you know that, you don't know what to do about it. And I think that's been really important.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Perhaps I should have also qualified that question. The question came from one of our attendees in Papua New Guinea, so a long way away. And the point being made there is that internet data is very expensive. So I guess, who's going to pay for that is quite important. I don't know, Murray, whether you've got any experience on that in terms of people working in locations where, we kind of take broadband as being pretty much standard throughout the UK, but other places it's rather different.
It is a great question. So welcome to the individual from Papua New Guinea, and hope they're well. I think a large concern that we had and the industry had, and we had this from regulators. We were reporting regularly to our regulators across Europe, was the impact on India, because if people can remember back in the day, it kind of spread west or east, whichever way you look at it, but it spread west, and actually India was quite late from other parts of the region from the COVID disease hitting the country. So given, I'm sure most people know this, given the large operations that the banks have in India, that was our concern, and we were talking to the regulators across Europe about that. We also had our own concern. We have over 2,000 people in Gurgaon and Mumbai. So we were working with local management, our local management, to ensure that all the necessary equipment was being supplied to our colleagues, and also things like booster signals. Some of the things I didn't even know about, I learned about quite quickly. And by and large, it worked very well. There are still challenges, such as the nature of the country, and some cities are better equipped than others. from the bank's perspective, we really drilled down into terms of, into understanding how many people and what did they do and what were they actually supporting BlackRock and doing, and what were their contingency plans in the event that there were internet connectivity issues, and they were able to appease us quite quickly with their own contingency plans that they had in place. But that was a major factor. Thankfully, I can sit here now, many months later, and said there were no issues. There were very few issues with that respect. Hopefully that answers your question, Richard, or the attendees' question.
Yes, thanks, Murray. Much appreciated. We have got a couple more questions coming in from the audience, but before I turn to those, I'd just like to go across to Tim just to see if you've got anything to add to the debate we've been having so far.
Yeah, well, when we talk to our clients on both sides of the fence, almost universally, they've been great in providing screens, chairs, desks, and as Pete said, whatever they want. But I would add a bit of caution that if working from home becomes, the new normal on a grand scale, I think people are going to start asking questions about who's paying my heating bill and my electricity bill, not least in Papua New Guinea, my data bill as well. Because I think the feeling is this is still something of a temporary situation, even though it's been going on for a year or more. But if we're here in 5 years' time, I just think there'll be a gentle shift towards picking up some other costs that are incurred. Don't forget, when you go to the office, you get free heating, free coffee most of the time, free everything, actually, which you're paying for yourself when you're at home.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. We have another question here. Have any members of the panel had to contend with requests from staff to work from international locations on a regular / permanent basis? If so, what are the key considerations for this type of situation? I don't know whether either Peter or Murray have any experience on that front.
I mean, I think that came up probably early on, or maybe last summer. I think that the bank overall took a view that people couldn't work from other locations, and I think the two primary considerations are obviously taxation for the individual, but also regulatory for the bank in terms of where the service was being provided from. That's not specific to our business. That was a sort of broad decision that was taken earlier on. I mean, I know that obviously people in smaller companies, I think, had a lot more flexibility. And I do recall having a conversation with one of our clients back in May or June last year when the CEO was sitting in Spain in his holiday house.
Yes, okay. Interesting thought that. There's another question we've got here. Where are we? I've lost it. Remote working means that employees can now be based almost anywhere in the world. Domestically, there is a superb initiative to make the central belt of Scotland the third leg of the European fund stool to challenge Dublin and Luxembourg. Would the panel agree that Scottish independence would sound the death knell for this? Well, I think that might be asked slightly tongue-in-cheek, but if anybody's got a view on that, perhaps I ought to go to our resident Scot first for that one.
I'd rather not comment on that for personal reasons. But I will say this, I'm looking forward to the elections on the 6th of May. So we shall see what happens.
All right, fair enough. Tim, any thoughts on that?
Not really. It's an interesting topic, isn't it? I mean, what it does open up, though, is the whole question of, back to your earlier question, Richard, around recruitment is, if you're in any of the major cities, you traditionally recruit locally. You don't need to do that anymore. You can recruit people within the boundaries of the regulations on a much wider talent pool. So with or without Scottish independence, and I'm not quite sure what that will mean from a recruitment point of view, you are now able to access a much wider pool of talent with remote working.
Just picking up on that point, I think, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I think one of the things that we have the opportunity to do is to look at work differently. because of the, as we talked about, people will go back to the office, but most likely it'll be a hybrid model. Yeah. But when we do, things like, climate change, the elimination of paper that we've seen in our business is enormous. And actually, there's no reason ever to go back to people printing out documents like we've all done in the past, print it, review it, scribble it, throw it, print it again, all that kind of thing. I think most of us have got out of that habit almost completely. And I think to the point about recruitment, actually, perhaps it opens up opportunities around diversity as well, because it's not just, where you recruit people, but you can recruit more people probably who can work flexibly, because of you don't have that need necessarily. And it does depend on the business area that you're in to have people in an office from 9 to 5 every day. So I think you can look at doing things differently. And I think for me, that's the massive opportunity that we've got here, is to look at the world of work differently and say, what do we need to be in an office or in a city to do? And let's make sure we do those things. And what can we do at home? And let's do those things at home. I think it just means we can look at things differently. And it's a real opportunity not to be missed.
Yeah, I think that kind of makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think much as you're suggesting, Peter, and all the evidence before us at the moment, seems to me we are moving towards more of a hybrid situation, a balance of working from home and going to the office. But does also pose some other interesting questions of when people do start coming back into the city centre, start going back into that office, how are they going to get there? Are they going to go on public transport? Are they going to be happy to go on public transport? When they get to the office, what are you going to do to try and protect them? The working arrangements, desk arrangements, lifts, and all the rest of it. I don't know. It seems there's still a lot of problems we're going to be facing. I don't know what you think about that, Murray.
A huge number of challenges. I would term it, Richard. And again, looking at from a BlackRock perspective, first of all, there was a lot of planning that went into the partial return to office last summer. We're quite similar to a number of the asset managers, and certainly the custodians, the providers, that we kind of immediately moved to a 50-50 model, where the whole organization was basically split into two globally. And we're still, we will maintain that, I think, as we start the return to office. And I look across Europe and all our European offices, and here in the UK, where we've got a large office in London and a large office in Edinburgh as well. So I think we will follow the guidelines that we put in place that will be tweaked. I think that there a lot of the safety controls that were put in place about dispensers and having your temperature measured as you entered into the building. I think initially certainly a lot of those will be retained as well. It's not until the vaccine is more widely rolled out in the UK that people will feel more comfortable with the wearing of compulsory wearing of masks, etc. Even if you just contrast the Edinburgh office and the London office, for instance, I mean, the Edinburgh office has got 4 floors. Well, most of us can manage to walk 4 floors, but in London and Drapers Gardens were 13 floors. And I think that would be testing the stamina of quite a lot of people to do that. So that just something as simple as the lifts, that's going to be a big issue as well. So lots of things to think about. Again, if you contrast London and Edinburgh, you can cycle to the office in Edinburgh, you can get a bus, whereas in London, I don't have to tell you guys that in the panel anyway, that a lot of that is going to be a train and then a train and a tube. How comfortable will our staff feel doing being on the Circle line at 7:45 or in the morning, where historically we know what it's like. So yeah, lots of things to work through, lots of challenges to work through. There's no doubt about it. And the banks. Sorry, Tim. On you go.
I was just going to say, in the same way that people adapted spectacularly well in the last 12 months, people will adapt to going back to the office as well. Remembering As I said, most people work in a hybrid model, so there won't be that many people all at once, but people will get used to the public transport conditions. People get used to having lateral COVID tests as they walk in the building and temperature checks. People get used to not being crammed in like sardines into the lifts and those sort of things. And I think it will just become fairly business as usual for most people most of the time. I think we underestimate how well people can adapt to the new conditions.
Yeah, I agree with that, Tim. I think it is, you know, it's a bit of an overused phrase, but there'll be a kind of new normal. I mean, you know, those of us who've worked in or traveled to Asia will know that, you know, the wearing of masks in Asia has been much more common for an extended period of time. And we're clearly going to see, you know, we're going to see that. We're also going to see, I think, that, you know, people struggling their way into the office when they're feeling a bit under the weather is going to be a thing of the past, because, you know, when they get to the office, they'll be sent home again very quickly, I would suspect. So, and, you know, and why would you know, unless there's something that really, really earth-shattering, we've all proven that we can do pretty much anything we need to do from home. So if, you know, I'd love to see the statistics, which I haven't seen, of kind of absenteeism over the last 12 months. Now, it's obviously distorted because of what's happening, but actually whether people have, you know, just got on with it, even though they're feeling a bit under the weather, because, well, actually, unless you're really, really feeling ill, why wouldn't you just come and sit at your desk and do a few things and just, you know, it helps fill up your day.
I mean, if there are any positives to come from the last 12 months, is, as you say, it's people won't be struggling to come to the office when they feel ill. People, you know, working from home was always considered a little bit of a free day off, and now it's considered a legitimate thing to do. And, you know, you mentioned earlier, Peter, around diversity and inclusion. You know, the clients we talked to about diversity and inclusion absolutely see this as a way of expanding and developing their whole strategy around this. You know, so there are some positives that come from this, is that this reset some of the bad culture that existed in our industry around working practice.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Thank you very much. I think we have a question coming from Chris Wilmot at RBC. Is that correct?
He's on mute.
He's on mute, yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Techno fear, sorry. The joys of working from home. My question is to the panel is, we've basically gone from 0 to 100% working from home in last year, and consensus is we're going to have a hybrid model this year working from home. What impact does that has that on BCP planning and provisioning in terms of like regulatory, you know, controls? You know, what's the panel's view?
Thanks, Craig. Which one, would one of you like to pick up on that? I don't know, Murray, perhaps you might try that one to start with.
Yeah, I don't want to sound flippant in the slightest, but in many ways is enhanced the process. So you know, so as I said earlier on, we've like many firms, we were asked to give very regular updates to the regulators, be it the CSSF, the FCA, etc., across Europe, CBI, all the well-known names, and that was obviously clearly a very keen topic that wanted to hear from us with respect to what are we doing, what's BlackRock doing, and you know, what happens if, and all that scenario, through to our vendors, including our providers. I don't really see it having. I can't see it having much more of an impact than it has. It's been stress tested beyond belief. We will have to adapt our health check program, our resilience health check program, as we call it, for the technology piece, which covers multiple facets, not just contingency planning, as you can imagine, Chris. But yeah, I think we'll tweak it to accommodate both within our walls and with our external vendors, and just as an aside, we've also pushed our providers, who, as everyone knows, uses multiple vendors themselves. And you know, we had a pretty notable event. It wasn't a contingency. It wasn't the result of cataclysmic event, but there was a well-known InfoSec breach at one of the TE fourth party vendors back in August, which was an interesting event in itself. So I think it's like dominoes. I think it's all the way down the line with respect to everybody having to tweak as we have this, almost certainly this hybrid model. I would say many months to come, certainly beyond June, I would have thought, but who knows.
Thanks, Mario. Peter, do you want to add to that?
Just because I do think it certainly has changed the nature of BCP in one way, in that probably the biggest risk that most of us looked at from a BCP perspective was loss of building. And actually, that's no longer a risk, effectively, is it? Because we've proved that, that I think when back in 2000 and Murray will probably remember this, there was the snowstorm in Edinburgh on March the 1st or 2nd or whenever it was in 2017.
Oh, sorry. We had a big one in 2010. Yeah, there was one about 3-4 years ago as well.
Yeah, one about 3 or 4 years ago. Now that caused us quite a lot of stress at the time because people couldn't get into the building. And as I mentioned, we had operations teams for whom working at home wasn't an issue. Now, fortunately, it was just one day and we did manage to get a number of people in, but effectively that's taken completely off the table now. So those kind of risks that people were looking at with their BCP have gone. But obviously, things like, I guess, cyber risk and, the risk of losing broadband in a large part of the country or something like that, they become the things that maybe people will need to think about just a little bit more.
Just to counter those comments, you could argue to a greater or lesser extent, people are now actually operating in a BCP environment by working from home. And given that there hasn't been a real world event of any magnitude so far, it hasn't really been tested out. So in the event that there is some major, international crisis, where's the BCP plan if you're already in it?
It's not a bad point, Tim. Listen, we've been running now for coming up to nearly 50 minutes, and we have no more questions coming in from the audience. Does any of our panel have anything else they wish to add? Peter?
I was just going to talk just for a minute or two, and again, it's on the kind of opportunity side, but it's looking at what does the office look like? Because I think, again, that's going to, that will change because so we've got a hybrid model, call it 50-50, 60-40, whatever it might be. It'll be different for people in slightly different functions. But you've got this concept, and I think I read in a report recently about activity-based working environments. Because the key thing is, back to the point I made earlier on, what are you going to the office to do? Hopefully it's not sitting at a desk responding to emails or writing a report, because in reality, we've all proved you don't need to be in the office to do that. So therefore, what you absolutely don't need in the office is a whole bunch of desks with screens on them for people to sit at by themselves all day. So, firstly, you need different types of spaces. And I mean, I worked for a consulting firm for a few months about 5 or 6 years ago, and they had a fantastic, and they still have, in Cheapside, they've got a great office space and it is that, you've got a bank of desks, and then you've got a little breakout room, and then you've got some high desks, and you've got a few, areas for one person, areas for 3 people, the formal pitch room for pitches and things like that. So I think it's really important that kind of, that we start to see that change. And also I think because you want people to want to go into the office, and actually a sort of long row of desks can be a bit, it's not the most exciting thing in the world. And we've seen a proliferation of long rows of desks over the last probably 10 to 15 years. And actually, if we go back to thinking about, well, let's design this so that people want to be in it, and so that it supports collaboration, it supports project work, it supports being able to do pitches, and it supports people just having some reflective time, then I think that's where, that's where we're going to see a lot of change.
One of the things that keeps coming up when we talk to people, again, on both sides of the fence, is, and it's a slightly cynical point, which is peer pressure. And there's going to be this push of people who choose to go back to the office for their own reasons, and having those conversations of, oh, you weren't in that meeting last week, were you? Because you were working from home. And I think there's going to be this kind of slightly unpleasant peer pressure going on where you'll feel the need to be seen in the office and be available physically. And I think that is a very common thread we're seeing, and that will start to push people back to the office as well. And when you get comments like the CEO from Goldman's who says, you know, all these staff need to be back in the office by the end of the summer, you know, that's a fairly clear instruction. So I think there's going to be peer pressure, employer pressure. But as I said earlier on, be careful what you wish for if you've already downsized your real estate, because you won't have anywhere to put everybody.
That's a very good point. Okay. Anybody got anything else they wish to add before I wrap up? I think what this discussion has shown me, and I hope everybody else, is that we're one step further in what's going to be a very long journey, and with some very potentially uncertain directions it's going to be taking in the future. So I think you know, to keep on talking about this is something that we're going to be doing. And I think also as our attendees here today leave this webinar, we're going to be just to ask if they'd like to see this type of topic being covered again in 2 or 3 months' time. Because it's not going away fast, that's for sure. But let me just thank everybody, to Murray Preston from BlackRock, to Peter Christmas from NatWest, and from Tim Wood from Cooper Wood Associates. Thank you all so much for participating. Really appreciate it. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you. Take care. Thanks, Fiona.